Hello, my name is Wade Nomura. I'm current mayor of the city of Carpinteria, also a Rotarian. Please enjoy watching The Good Life.
Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you're with us. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where all these great interviews are placed, and then what we call power clips. We take out of those interviews some of the great moments, and so we have those power clips on there as well. People from all walks of life, business, public servants, entrepreneurs, overcomers, young people, famous people, not famous people. It's a little bit of everything, but it's the underlying theme here is that we're focused on the good stuff. We're focused on inspiring and encouraging and honoring and empowering and focusing on the good. There's plenty of negative stuff going on all the time on planet Earth, but here we're talking about the good stuff. So glad you're with us. And we see that you're joining us from all over the world on goodlifetelevision.org, which is so encouraging. So thank you. And you can also find us at all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, blah, 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 all of them. I'm really excited about my guest today. The mayor of, there's a great little town near where we're sitting called Carpinteria, California. And the mayor of that town, the Honorable Wade Nomura, is with me. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wade has written a book that will be on your screen called Creating Destiny, which is a really interesting story of his life that I've been diving into the last couple of days. And so congratulations on the book. I want to get into that in a second, but start with kind of your growing up. I know the first part of this is your family went through some difficult stuff, but talk a little bit about that.
That is true. My family came in the 1890s, 1900s, and when World War II broke out, they were actually taken from their homes and interned into relocation centers or internment camps during that time. So they were 4 years. My family, both sides, my mother and father's side, ended up in Poston, Arizona, spent 4 years there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what was it like coming out of that for the next generation?
I would say the difficult part of that relocation had to do with them having to leave all of their possessions behind. Right. They weren't allowed to take anything except for what they can carry in suitcases. So once the war was over and they were given the opportunity to leave the camps, most of them had lost what they had. There's no reason to go back, so a lot of them relocated. The Nomura clan actually ended up here in the Montecito area because then International President of the Olympics, Avery Brundage, actually recruited my grandfather to be his caretaker for his estate. So that's how our clan ended up in Santa Barbara. Wow. Yeah.
It's kind of mind-boggling that happened here, you know, in your family. I mean, that's still kind of stunning to me.
It was tough times, I would say. Even though I was born after the war, we still had a lot of residue of discrimination, only because of the fact that the war was still fresh in a lot of people's minds. So I did have to deal with some discrimination in my lifetime, unfortunately, but fortunately it does get better.
Yeah. You've had a very interesting career, and of course now you're mayor, and you've been heavily involved in the Rotary, which I want to talk about, but you're a 5-time BMX champion. Where did that come from?
This is true. It's a story in itself, and that's why I had to put the book together, because of the fact it was so random what happened to me. Actually, I went to school, graduated from Cal Poly in agriculture, horticulture, started my own landscaping business. And one of the early jobs that I got was working for the city to do a project development, low-income housing. And when I went there were 5 kids that came and they actually greeted me, and this was during school time, and they would spend the whole day with me while I was doing this landscape job. And I asked them, I go, aren't you supposed to be in school right now? And the answer was, well, technically yes, but unofficially we got kicked out of school. They told us not to come back because we were problem children. So I said, well, if that's the case, you're not gonna bother me, but you're gonna have to work for me. So I put them to work, and they started working. One day I had my motorcycle in the back of my truck, and they go, what are you going to do with that? I go, well, I'm a racer, so I practice racing motorcycles. They asked if they can go with me, so I took them out to the local track, ran a few laps with them. They loved it. They decided, when we grow up, we want to become racers. I go, well, motorcycles are expensive, but BMX is something you may want to take a look at. So they were interested in that. I ended up buying them 2 bikes. They worked for it. Well, when I say worked for it, 25 cents a day, but we multiplied it by 100 basically is what we did. I bought them 2 bikes, helmets, pads, shoes, whatever they needed to race, and I signed them up at a local track. They went out and they loved it. They were terrible at racing, by the way, but unfortunately they hadn't barely learned how to ride a bicycle, but they wanted to race. So we started that way, and that's what got me into BMX. One day they had a Father's Day race. I signed up for it, ended up winning that race by a substantial margin, which ended up being, they invited me to a national event. They said there's a national event 3 months out in Las Vegas. You'll have to race this because it's the first race ever they're going to have an old man's class, 26 and over. So I built a bike, went out there to race, and ended up winning the race, giving me my first national title. Oh so from that time I go, well, it looks like I have some aptitude and skills for this. So I continued racing, and I ended up winning 5 national titles. Turned pro at the age of 30, which was a huge mistake. My lowest ranking as a pro was number 12 in the world. But that ended up, the career beat me up enough to where I had to walk away from the sport. Fortunately, I was fairly intact, 22 broken bones and dislocations, but it was time to leave the sport, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
It
so
was
how long
amazing.
did you actually race? How many years did you race for?
About 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
Wow. Rotary International is an amazing organization that you've been heavily involved in, not just at the local level. You've managed and assisted and been involved in huge 200 charitable projects around the globe. You've been all over the world doing these impactful projects. Talk a little bit about Rotary and kind of its place in your life and kind of your thoughts about it.
My Rotary history is a unique one, pretty interesting in itself. My late wife was recruited to join Rotary. She started a club. We chartered a club at that time, the Carpinteria Morning Club. And she came to me, and as we were charting it, she says, we need to have signatures. We need 25 signatures to charter this club. So we're stuck for 2 weeks on 24. We need the 25th one. I said, not me, don't count me in. She says, well, you got to sign it. And at that time, I said no intentionally because I was with 8 other charitable foundations, and so I couldn't squeeze another one in. I signed on the dotted line, and sure enough, we became a chartering club. So that's what got me started. I didn't do it because I loved it. I did it because my company was paying for it. I got a breakfast out of it. They started a project in Mexico, and they asked if anybody was bilingual and would be able to assist in a water project in Mexico. So I signed up, said yes, I'd be happy to do it. I volunteered for it, them not realizing that this was going to be a paid trip by Rotary, and that I had never been on an airplane out of the country in my life. And I was probably in my 50s. So I signed up for a free trip, not realizing what that was going to lead to.
Wow.
We did the first project there. It was very successful. I was greeted by the people of the village, and the gentleman that was the sheriff, we call him, came over to me, shook my hand, and says, thank you for bringing us water. For us, water is life. Thank you for bringing us life. That was life changer. That is, quote, my Rotary moment. That's why I do what I do. All of a sudden I realized it's not about me, it's what I could do for other people.
Thank you for bringing us water, because for us, water is life. That's what he said?
That's exactly what he said. He told me that in Spanish. Translated, that's what it meant.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it was a very touching moment. It got me. It got me. So much for the free trip. I probably paid back 100 times on that trip.
That's right. And then you've been involved at an international level with Rotary ever since.
That is correct. I do a lot of project evaluations for the Rotary Foundation. I am currently the project coordinator for water and sanitation projects worldwide as an evaluator.
Wow.
Yeah.
How great. We were talking about Rotary before we came on. Rotary's got an amazing history. You were mentioning they're in 200
plus countries and geographic regions, correct.
And what is the connection with the United Nations that you're mentioning?
The original seating was organized by Rotarians, and that ended up becoming the United Nations. It was a peace conference the first time around. 49 of the originally seated members were Rotarians. And to this day, we have a permanent seat on the United Nations floor.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a very unique connection, something that Rotary's pretty proud of, but not everybody knows about.
I never knew that history of Rotary. So Rotary International is a powerful thing. Why'd you run for mayor?
This is a Rotary trick. When I say a Rotary trick, I had served on the Architecture Review Board for 18 years, almost 18 years.
Okay.
And I was approached by 4 different groups, interest groups, asking that I would run for city council. All 4 times I said no, I did not want to because I didn't believe in politics. As you know, Rotary has no politics, no religion. So I didn't want to define what I was doing based on politics. So I stayed free of that one. Finally, the last group came to me and said, we want you to run for city council because we think you could do something great for the city. And I go, well, tell me about this. What could I do and why would you want me to do it? They said you have high integrity, high ethical standards. You are one of the hardest working people in Carpinteria that we've seen based on recent history. And because you're Rotarian, we trust you. That got me. I said, because of that, I signed on the dotted line, ran for city council. That eventually led to becoming a mayor. I was appointed within the council. I've served, now I'm on my 2nd term. One of the first times where a mayor has actually been reappointed by the council.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was quite an honor and shows a lot of confidence in the community, so
Yeah.
I appreciated it.
Carpinteria is a great town.
It's a great town.
Have you been there a long time?
Born and raised in Santa Barbara. I moved to Carpinteria right after I graduated from college.
Okay.
But I was working there in high school.
Okay.
So,
It's a great town.
yeah.
You know, you've written and talked, and I know you've worked in the area of leadership, in the area of team building, and so much rises and falls on leadership. You know, in my opinion, leadership matters. What are you mentioned integrity a second ago, but what are some of your principles, thought processes involved if you were talking to a young leader, a young person who wanted to pursue leadership and thought that they were gifted that way or had a desire to serve? How would you advise, or what are your kind of thoughts on leadership?
My grandfather was one of my chief mentors, and when I was young, he took me in his wing. I am the firstborn son of the firstborn son, making me, quote, one of the leaders of our family. One of the lessons he taught me was we went to the Brundage estate. I was about 4, maybe 5 years old, and we walked through and I looked at his gardens that he had been maintaining. He was very proud of the gardens. They were immaculate. And as we walked through, he showed me everything that he had done that week. And as we left, he goes, I want you to look back. So I turned around and looked back at the gardens. He goes, what do you see? I say, I see a garden that's immaculate. It's impeccable. Every hedge was perfectly cut square. There is no leaf out of place. There's no weeds in there. Even the ground and gravel were raked with a pattern. I said, it's immaculate. He goes, that's your lesson for today. No matter what you do in life, always leave it better than you found it. So as I started going through life, I realized that this is the same concept or theory, philosophy we should do in leadership. Always make things better than how you found it.
Yes.
And so that's where leadership became so important to me. And I realized that perception-wise, it's not what you see that's better, but it's what other people will see that's better. Mm-hmm. And so you can't be selfish. One of the hardest things about being a leader is that you have to be impersonal. You can't take it what you think is important for you. It's what's important and benefiting everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Thinking about the big picture.
Exactly, exactly. And it makes it hard because for example, in politics, as a city councilman, we are one of the few people in the whole city that aren't allowed to voice our opinion because we can't have one. We have to be open-minded and objective. And that makes it very difficult because most of the time you have an idea what you want, but that becomes an agenda and you can't go forward with an agenda.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this book. It's really interesting. It's your story. I'll just read from toward the end. He said, I titled this book Creating Destiny because I believe we can all be authors of our own story. Though remember, it might not be the story you thought you were going to write at the start. We can choose to take these paths and make the most of them. Even the darkest of days have taught me valuable lessons and an appreciation of what I have even more. Creating Destiny. That's an interesting title. Talk about that.
The Creating Destiny part came from, first of all, the story I told you about the 5 kids in the project that got me into BMX. When I worked with the 5 kids, I realized that it was a highlight in their life. They loved doing it. They had something that they were enjoying doing. There's something that they were constructive about. They were building and working hard to focus on this dream. Unfortunately, as I started getting into the national scene, I had to leave that behind because now I was traveling 120,000 miles a year. I was gone just about all the time. And so I had to leave that part of it behind. I later found out after, this is probably almost 30 years later, that the unfortunate part were the 5 kids that I was telling you about, 2 of them ended up committing suicide. The third one ended up a multiple felony offender, is in jail for life, in prison for life. The other 2 I completely lost track of. Realizing what had happened to me and what had happened to them is where I came up with the name Creating Destiny. Because had I gone in a direction I thought I wanted to go, I wouldn't have ended up where I am today. No idea. So that's why the name of the book, Creating Destiny. We can create our own destiny, but we could also be the one that ruin our own destiny.
Right.
We can go the wrong way. We could pick something that we thought was the right direction, but it's not. If you're loose, if you're able to move, be fluid with what happens to you, then things happen. I would have never been a national champion had the kids not talked me into racing a Father's Day race. Who would have thought that? I never would have built the Nomura bike that became fairly famous had that not happened either. And I had not
really been.
So all of these things all happened.
Yeah.
I also, 2001, I was inducted into the Japanese American Hall of Fame for my sports, for bicycles. And there were 42 of us athletes, including Olympic gold medalists, world champions, all of the above. And they asked me, what would I attribute my success to? And I started thinking about it. I go, well, you know, there's all kinds of things that worked in my favor. But the one thing that captured my thought was, it was because of the sacrifices of those people around me that I succeeded. My wife, my parents, my kids, my family, my friends, all believed in my dream, my vision, my goal. And because of that, they sacrificed for me. I never saw it when I was racing because it's such a lonely sport. But when I realized that, you know what, it's time for me to give back too, to give other people an opportunity to get their dreams achieved and accomplished.
That's beautiful. You mentioned being fluid. I like that. One of my heroes is Vin Scully, the old broadcaster of the Dodgers. Sure. And he was quoted one time as saying, if you want to make God smile, tell him your plans. You know, because life can, you know, and so being fluid and not being rigid on what path you think you're supposed, that's a really insightful thought.
I think what part of it does with that philosophy is that you will then follow the benefit to benefit others. I think that's one of the main points, because if you become focused on a goal, you think about it, that goal is selfish. It's self-centered to yourself, what you want to achieve. Mm-hmm. But if you look at how you could benefit other people, now you're moving different tracks. BMX was one. I would never have been in city council. I would never be mayor had it not been for Rotary. I would have never joined Rotary had I not been forced into joining the organization. Right. Everything just happens.
Isn't that amazing? People can get this book. Is it wadenomura.com?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, wadenomura.com, and it's Creating Destiny. I commend it to you. One theme I sense through your life is service. And I in fact, my dad, I'm not going to try to quote one of his favorite quotes from Albert Schweitzer about service, but because I'll butcher it. But there's the quote in essence talks about how the happiest people that you see are those that have discovered how to serve. And sometimes I think with young people, we're so busy talking about achievement that we miss service. Achieve, climb the ladder. Where the joy is over here, you know, in service. Right. I'm just freewheeling here, but talk about service in your life, because it seems like something has happened in you. Like when that guy says to you, "Thank you for bringing us water," yeah. That was a profound moment.
That was a profound moment.
Where if you hadn't been serving, that would never have happened. That was life-changing.
It was life-changing. True. I think the focus of becoming service-oriented has to do more with an awareness of what you could do to assist other people, to help other people. And that awareness then gives you that drive, that determination to be able to give to others what you have. I realized through Rotary mostly that I had 2 ways to go through life. Number one is I set a goal for myself and I become what I would consider at that time successful. Money, nice house, nice cars, you know, have everything you need and you're comfortable with life. However, that changed when I went into Rotary, because all of a sudden now it's like, wait a minute. From that time where I've given this gentleman life, I realized that I could influence and make a greater impact throughout the world as I serve other people.
Yeah.
It's not about a house, it's not about a car, because that just goes away when you pass away.
Right.
But the impacts you have and the changes that you made in other people's life, that will last forever. And that's, I think, what I looked at as, quote, creating my legacy, is making sure that I'm able to influence, assist, and help people around the world. Currently, this is not a brag, this is through Rotary, I've been able to probably impact over 2 million lives around the world.
Wow.
And this is by just being involved, by being fluid.
Yeah. Beautiful. So the moral of the story is buy the book and join Rotary. Those are our 2 goals. Fascinating life, great story. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you also, and thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
coming. We'll see you next time. I'm inspired.